The papers hit the concrete at 7:12 in the morning. Mitchell Graves had slapped the bottom of the stack while she was mid-sentence, and the batch tracking sheets and inspection forms scattered across the factory floor in a wide fan. Now he stood pointing at her, index finger close enough to touch her collarbone. "Day 1, he said, "and you can't even read a routing number." 30 workers stopped what they were doing. Nobody moved. From Station 9, a man in a gray work shirt set down a micrometer, walked across the floor, crouched, gathered the papers, and stood. He held the stack out to her. Then he stepped between them. "You want to write up too, Thatcher?" Gavin Thatcher did not raise his voice. He did not move. The woman behind him took the papers. Her grip on them was very tight. Nobody on that floor knew her name, and nobody knew why she was really there. But stay, because what happened next on that factory floor changed everything. Not just for her, not just for him, but for every single person in that building. Gavin Thatcher had worked at Benton Manufacturing for 3 years, and in that time, he had never been late for a shift, never filed a grievance, and never volunteered a single detail about his life before Portland. The other machinists knew the basics. He was 38. He lived off Beaverton-Hillsdale Highway in a 2-bedroom rental with his daughter. He drove a 12-year-old Tacoma with a dent in the rear quarter panel. He clocked in, did his work, clocked out. The part they did not know was that before Benton, before Portland, before the rental and the Tacoma and the lunch pail, he packed at 5:15 every morning. He had been a structural engineer at Kerrigan Dynamics in Huntsville, Alabama. Not junior, not contract. A Level 4 structural lead on a defense satellite program with a clearance high enough that his name did not appear on the published papers he had co-authored. He spent 6 years designing load-bearing assemblies that went into orbit. Then Laura died. November of 2022. A rain-slick intersection on Highway 72, a flatbed that ran the light, and a phone call at 4:17 in the afternoon that divided his life into before and after. He was 35. Harper was 6. Kerrigan did not fire him. During the 14 months he spent trying to hold himself together while raising a daughter alone, the defense contract that funded his division was not renewed. The department was folded into a larger unit in Colorado Springs. Everyone was offered relocation. Gavin, who could not uproot a 6-year-old from the only school she had ever known, declined. His badge stopped working on a Friday. He applied to Benton 7 months later, after he and Harper followed Laura's sister to Portland. The hiring manager glanced at the resume, said he was overqualified, and offered a machinist position at $23 an hour. Gavin took it. The schedule was steady. He could drop Harper at Bridlemeal Elementary by 7:45 and make the floor by 8. Harper was 9 now. She had her mother's jaw and her father's habit of going quiet when she was thinking. Saturday evenings, the two of them sat at the kitchen table with a sheet of balsa wood, a tube of cement, and whatever model airplane kit Gavin had picked up from the hobby shop on Barber Boulevard. He held the pieces. She glued. Paige Caldwell was 34 and had been the CEO of Caldwell Industries for 14 months. The company had been her father's. Martin Caldwell built it from a single machine shop in Tigard into a mid-market precision manufacturer with 400 employees and contracts across the aerospace and defense sectors. When he retired in the spring of 2024, he handed the keys to his daughter. She had been making it work. But 8 months ago, Caldwell Industries acquired Benton Manufacturing, a specialty hydraulics plant on the east side of Portland. And since the acquisition, the numbers from Benton had not made sense. 2 quality recalls in 14 months. Turnover up 35%. 3 senior technicians quit without exit interviews. The monthly reports that landed on Paige's desk were spotless, but the recalls and the turnover told a different story. Mitchell Graves, 52, had run Benton's floor as operations director for 9 years. Paige had never met him. He reported to a VP who reported to her, and in 8 months of ownership, the only version of Mitchell she knew was a name on emails and a voice on quarterly calls. He had no reason to know her face. So she had her HR director create a temp intern placement through the staffing agency Benton used. She filled out the paperwork under her first name only. On a Monday morning in March, she walked onto the factory floor carrying a clipboard with nothing on it. Bev Sanderson was the first person who spoke to her. 63 years old, senior floor technician, 22 years at Benton. She showed Paige where to put her things and where not to stand when the overhead crane was moving. She did not ask why Paige was there. In 22 years, Bev had learned that asking questions at Benton was not rewarded. Day 2. Mitchell assigned the new intern to Station 9 for parts inspection training. Station 9 belonged to Gavin. He showed her the basics without ceremony: how to read a routing sheet, use the calipers, log a measurement on the inspection form. One line per part, blue ink, no shorthand. He was patient in the way that people are patient when they have done something 10,000 times and still believe the details matter. At 11:40, a batch of hydraulic valve housings rolled off the CNC line and arrived at Station 9 on a steel cart. 48 units, each one a machined aluminum cylinder about the size of a coffee can, destined for a fluid control system in commercial aircraft landing gear. Gavin picked up the first housing, seated it in the fixture, and ran the bore gauge. He checked the readout, set it down, picked up the second. On the 5th unit, he stopped. He held the gauge in place for a long time. Then he pulled it out, recalibrated, and measured again. He reached under his station and pulled out a clipboard, not the company-issued form, but a personal one. A thick stack of line paper held by a steel clip, edges soft from months of handling. Every page was filled with handwritten entries in small, precise block letters. Dates, batch numbers, bore measurements, tolerance readings, notes in the margins. He flipped back 3 pages, then 5, then 8. This batch drifts .003 off nominal on the inner bore, he said, not to Paige, not to anyone in particular. Same direction as batch 214 last month, and 191 before that. He was quiet for a moment. Progressive tolerance drift. The spindle bearing on machine 6 is wearing unevenly. If we ship this batch, the seals will hold in static testing but fail under sustained hydraulic pressure above 3,000 psi. He marked the cart with a red tag and called for a line stop. Mitchell arrived in under 4 minutes. He looked at the red tag, looked at Gavin, picked up the housing, glanced at it, and set it back down. This is within acceptable tolerance, Mitchell said. Ship it. It's not the single measurement, Gavin said. He held up the clipboard. It's the pattern. 3 consecutive batches drifting the same direction. That's not tolerance variation. That's mechanical wear. Mitchell looked at the clipboard the way a man looks at something that has no business being in his factory. He did not take it. Ship the batch, he said, and I'd think twice about stopping my line again. He walked away, but before he reached the end of the aisle, he stopped at the nearest terminal and typed a note into Gavin's employee file. Insubordination. Paige had not said a word during the exchange. She stood at the edge of Station 9 and watched Mitchell's back disappear down the center aisle. That evening, from a hotel room on the east side, she logged into the Caldwell HR system and opened Gavin Thatcher's file. Kerrigan Dynamics. Structural engineer. Level for clearance. 6 years on defense satellite programs. She closed the laptop and sat with her hands flat on the desk for a long time. The man who had stood between her and Mitchell, who carried a personal clipboard because the company's system was not good enough, was an aerospace engineer working a machinist's wage on a factory floor. And no one at Benton had ever bothered to look. But this story was just getting started, because what Gavin had written on that clipboard would turn out to be the most important document in the building. And neither of them knew it yet. The rest of the week moved the way weeks move in a factory, by the shift bell and the parts count and the low hum of machines that never fully stop. Paige worked alongside Gavin at Station 9, and each day she asked questions. Not the kind an intern would ask. The kind that started with what the floor looked like and ended with what the report said it looked like. Gavin answered directly. He did not complain about Mitchell or the company or the pay. He stated what he saw. Scrap bins emptied before they were counted. Rework hours logged as standard production. Overtime shifts that appeared nowhere in the weekly summary sent upstairs. He said these things the way a man reads a weather report. Here is what is happening. Draw your own conclusions. On Thursday afternoon, Mitchell walked the center aisle during a shift change and stopped in front of a 24-year-old operator named Danny Estrada. Danny had transposed 2 digits on a batch code, an honest mistake, a 10-second fix. Mitchell did not hand him a correction form. He stood in the middle of the floor and dressed Danny down by name, loud enough that workers 3 stations away turned their heads. He called the mistake careless. He called it a liability. He asked Danny, in front of everyone, whether he needed to go back to orientation. Danny stood with his jaw tight and his hands at his sides, and waited for it to end. Gavin walked over. Not to Mitchell, to Danny. He picked up the mislabeled tray, remarked it with the correct batch code, and set it back on the rack. Then he told Danny, calmly, that the fix was done and he could get back to his queue. Mitchell watched from 6 feet away. He said nothing. He turned and kept walking. That night, Paige opened a spreadsheet in her hotel room and began building a second set of books. On one side, the official operations reports she had been receiving since the acquisition. On the other, the numbers she was collecting from the floor. Scrap rates. The report said 1.8%. Her count said 4.6. Rework hours, reported at under 40 per week. Actual, by her estimate, over 110. Overtime, officially minimal. In practice, Mitchell was running unauthorized weekend shifts that did not appear in any system. The gap was not small. It was structural. And the longer she sat with the spreadsheet, the more clearly she saw the shape of what Mitchell had built. Not a factory that performed well, but a factory that reported well. On Friday, Mitchell found Paige sorting a parts bin near the loading dock. He stood over her with his arms crossed. "You're an intern," he said. "Your job is to observe, not to reorganize my floor. I was just trying to match the routing sheets too." "Stay in your lane," Mitchell said. He did not wait for her to finish. The following Monday, the shift schedule appeared on the break room wall. Gavin Thatcher had been moved from day shift to night shift, effective immediately. No explanation was given. No request had been made. Mitchell had reassigned him with a single entry in the scheduling system. And when Gavin saw the printout at 6:55 in the morning, he stood in front of the bulletin board for a long time without moving. Night shift started at 10 p.m. Harper's school let out at 3:15. The math was the kind that single parents do in their heads a dozen times before accepting the answer. He could not be in 2 places at once. He found Bev before the morning bell, asked if she could cover the first 90 minutes of his night shift 3 days a week so he could get Harper settled with the neighbor before driving back to the plant. Bev said yes without hesitation. She did not ask why he had been moved. She already knew. Paige saw the schedule change on the board. She recognized it. The same tool Mitchell had used on Danny Estrada, on the 3 senior technicians who had quit without exit interviews, on anyone who stood between him and a clean report. Reassignment. Isolation. Attrition. He did not fire people. He made their lives difficult enough that they fired themselves. And the ones who stayed, like Bev, stayed quiet. That afternoon, she found Bev alone near the supply cage during a break rotation. She did not claim to be anything other than an intern. She simply asked how long things had been this way. Bev was quiet for a moment. Then she opened a metal drawer beneath her workstation and pulled out a manila folder thick enough to bend at the spine. Inside were written incident reports, safety violations, quality discrepancies, verbal complaints, all filed by Bev over the past 4 years. Each one had been submitted through Benton's internal HR system. Each one had a date stamp and a form number. Not one of them had ever been acknowledged, forwarded, or acted upon. The HR coordinator here used to work directly under Mitchell before she moved to personnel, Bev said. She files everything where it belongs. And then it sits. Paige held the folder. She turned through the pages slowly, reading the dates, and did not say anything for a long time. She stood in the narrow aisle between the supply cage and the wall and understood, for the first time, that the problem at Benton Manufacturing was not about metrics. It was not about scrap rates or rework hours. It was about a system that had been designed, carefully, over 9 years, to make the truth disappear before it ever reached someone who could act on it. The following week, Paige made a mistake. She had been accessing the quality database from a floor terminal, running parts comparisons between the digital inspection records and the physical routing sheets she had been collecting from Station 9. The login assigned to her as an intern gave read-only access to the production module, but the quality database sat behind a different permission tier. On a Tuesday afternoon, the system flagged the access and routed an alert to Mitchell's dashboard. He found her at the terminal at 3:45. "You're in a system you don't have clearance for," he said. His voice was level, but his posture was not. One hand on the edge of the desk, leaning forward. "That's a terminable offense. I can walk you out right now." Before Paige could answer, Gavin's voice came from behind her. "I gave her the login." Mitchell turned. Gavin stood at the end of the aisle, hands in his pockets. "She asked to run a parts comparison for the training module," Gavin said. "I gave her my access. If there's a problem, It's my problem. Mitchell stared at him. Then he pulled a form from the clipboard on the wall and filled it out in front of both of them. 3-day suspension, he said. Without pay. Effective now. Turn in your badge at the front desk. Gavin removed his badge from the lanyard, set it on the desk, and walked toward the exit without looking back. He did not argue. He did not glance at Paige. She stood at the terminal and watched the door close behind him. Her hands were still on the keyboard, and she did not move them for a long time. Gavin had not hesitated. He had not weighed the cost. 3 days without pay, a second mark on his record, the schedule disruption that would ripple into Harper's evenings and the neighbors' goodwill. He had simply stepped forward and taken it. Not because he knew who Paige was. Not because he expected anything in return. Because a man was standing over a woman with a threat, and Gavin Thatcher did not leave people standing alone in front of threats. The rest of the afternoon, Paige continued her shift as if nothing had changed, logging parts, following routing sheets, keeping her head down the way Mitchell's system had taught everyone on the floor to keep their heads down. But she was running out of time. Mitchell had seen her at the terminal. He had not yet asked why an intern would be interested in quality records that had nothing to do with training. But he would. And the moment she revealed who she was, he would begin cleaning. He would sanitize the digital records, pressure the HR coordinator, reassign or intimidate anyone who might corroborate what she had seen. She had watched him operate for nearly 2 weeks. He was not careless. He was methodical. At 5:20, she walked to the parking lot, sat in the front seat of her car, and called David Kern, her COO in Tigard. I need an independent audit team at Ben Manufacturing, she said. Full quality records review, digital and physical. Ready to deploy by Monday morning. Kern asked how bad it was. Worse than the reports, she said. I'll have specifics by end of week. She hung up and sat with her hands on the wheel. Across the lot, she could see Gavin's Tacoma. He was sitting in the driver's seat with the engine off, both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at the chain-link fence that bordered the property. He sat there for a long time. Then he started the truck and pulled out of the lot without turning his headlights on until he reached the street. And if you think Mitchell was going to get away with what he had been doing on that factory floor, stay with this one. Because the evidence was closer than anyone realized. Gavin came back on a Friday. His badge had been reactivated at midnight. When he walked through the side entrance at 7:58, the floor was already running. A few workers glanced at him. Danny Estrada gave a small nod from Station 4. Nobody said anything about the suspension. That was how things worked under Mitchell. You disappeared for a few days, you came back, and the silence around the reason was the punishment itself. Gavin went to Station 9, set down his lunch pail, and clipped his badge to his shirt. His clipboard was where he had left it, tucked into the bracket under the counter. He pulled it out, checked the last entry, the date of his suspension, and turned to a fresh page. Bev found him during the 9:30 break. She stood beside his station with a coffee cup she was not drinking from, and spoke quietly enough that the machine noise covered her past 3 feet. There's something I need to show you, she said. I should have shown someone a long time ago. Last fall, Bev told him, Caldwell Industries had mandated a records digitization project across all acquired facilities. The goal was to migrate legacy paper files into a centralized digital archive. Mitchell assigned a junior admin to scan everything in the quality records room, inspection certificates, calibration logs, material certs, going back 6 years. Bev had been tasked with boxing the originals for off-site storage. But before she sealed the boxes, she did what she always did. She checked. She pulled a random sample of the freshly scanned certificates and compared them to the originals in her hands. The paper certificates, hand-signed by Benton's lead inspector, showed one set of numbers. The digital versions now in the system showed different numbers. Not every entry, not every certificate, but enough. Someone had altered the scans after upload. Bore tolerances widened. Surface finish values smoothed. Rejection rates zeroed out. Bev had kept the originals that did not match. She locked them in the bottom drawer of a filing cabinet in the records room, behind a stack of expired safety manuals nobody had touched in years. She brought Gavin to the cabinet during the lunch break. He opened the drawer, pulled out the folder, and laid the original certificates on the counter beside his clipboard. Then he flipped through his handwritten log, the one Mitchell had looked at with contempt, the one that had cost him a note in his file and a 3-day suspension. The numbers matched. His measurements, logged one by one over 14 months at Station 9, aligned with the original certificates, the ones signed by the lead inspector before anyone touched the digital system. Bore tolerances, surface finishes, dimensional checks. The clipboard and the paper originals told the same story. The digital system told a different one. Mitchell Graves had been systematically falsifying quality inspection records for at least 14 months, since shortly after Caldwell Industries completed the acquisition. Every batch that left Benton's floor had been recertified in the digital archive with values that met or exceeded specification. The originals told the truth. Marginal parts shipped as conforming, borderline tolerances passed without review, rejection rates reduced to fractions of their actual values. By Gavin's count, the falsified records covered more than $4.7 million in hydraulic valve housings and precision components shipped to aerospace clients across 8 states. That afternoon, Gavin found Paige at the break table. He set the clipboard and the folder of original certificates between them. He opened the folder, placed one original certificate next to its digital printout, and let the numbers speak. Paige looked at the discrepancy for a long time. "Someone above us needs to see this," Gavin said. She looked up at him. He stood with his hands at his sides and his face completely still. He had no idea who she was. It would not have changed anything if he had. "They will," she said. 3 days later, on a Monday morning at 8:15, 2 white sedans pulled into the Benton parking lot and 7 people in business attire walked through the front entrance carrying document cases and laptop bags. Mitchell Graves was in his glass-walled office on the mezzanine when he saw them through the window. He stood up from his desk. He watched them cross the floor in a straight line toward the quality records room. Then he turned and opened the shredder beside his filing cabinet. He fed 3 pages through before the office door opened. Paige stepped inside. The temp badge was gone. Beside her stood David Kern, Chief Operating Officer of Caldwell Industries. "My name is Paige Caldwell," she said. "I'm the CEO of Caldwell Industries, the parent company of this facility. I've been working on your floor for the past 2 weeks." Mitchell's hand was still on the shredder. He released it slowly, as if he were setting down something fragile. "The audit team will be reviewing all quality records, digital and physical, going back to the date of acquisition," Paige said. "The original inspection certificates preserved by Bev Sanderson have been secured. Your system access was suspended at 7 this morning." Mitchell did not speak. His jaw worked once, twice, and then went still. He looked past Paige, through the glass wall of his office, at the factory floor below. The workers had stopped. Every one of them. CNC operators standing with their hands away from the controls, assemblers paused mid-motion, forklift drivers sitting with engines idling. They looked up at the mezzanine the way a building looks at the sky before a storm. All at once. All silent. Mitchell sat down. Not because he was invited to. Because his legs made the decision for him. On the floor, the audit team was already working. 2 members were imaging the hard drives from the quality terminals. A third was cataloging the filing cabinets in the records room. Bev Sanderson stood 3 feet away from the open bottom drawer, hands folded in front of her, watching them photograph each document she had preserved. She had carried those certificates in that drawer for 5 months, behind expired safety manuals, in a building run by a man who had spent 9 years making sure that people like Bev never had anyone to show things to. Now 7 people with document cases and imaging equipment were treating those pages like evidence. Because that is what they were. Gavin was at Station 9. He had seen Paige walk across the floor, without a hard hat, without safety glasses, without the posture of someone who answered to Mitchell Graves. He had watched her climb the stairs to the mezzanine with the man in the charcoal suit. He had seen the way the audit team straightened when she passed, the way Kern held the office door, the way she paused at the threshold and looked out over the floor one last time before stepping through. Not the glance of an intern seeing a factory for the first time, but the survey of someone who owned what she was looking at. It took him less than 30 seconds to assemble the picture. The intern who asked questions no intern would ask. The woman who studied routing sheets the way an engineer reads a blueprint. The person who had sat across from him at the break table and looked at the falsified inspection numbers without surprise, because she had already known what she was looking for. He thought about the 3-day suspension, the login she could have provided herself, the 2 weeks she had stood beside him at Station 9 and let him believe she was a temp from a staffing agency. He thought about the papers Mitchell had knocked from her hands on day one, and the fact that she had let it happen, had stood there and taken it, because she needed to see exactly what Mitchell was. He picked up the micrometer. He measured the next part in the queue. He did not go upstairs. He did not ask anyone what was happening. He went back to his work. The board of Caldwell Industries convened in the Tigard headquarters conference room on a Thursday afternoon, 3 days after the audit began. Paige presented the findings herself. She stood at the head of a table of 8 directors and laid it out without inflection. 14 months of falsified inspection records for $0.7 million in parts shipped to aerospace clients with documentation that did not match original quality certifications, a pattern of employee retaliation designed to suppress internal reporting, and a local HR coordinator who had functioned as a firewall between the factory floor and the corporate office. She placed Gavin Thatcher's clipboard log on the conference table, 14 months of handwritten measurements in small block letters, beside the digital printouts from the Benton quality system. She did not editorialize the comparison. She set them side by side and let the numbers do what numbers do when you stop editing them. Then she placed Bev Sanderson's original certificates beside both. 3 columns of data for the same parts, the same batches, the same dates. 2 matched. 1 did not. The directors read the discrepancies in silence. One of them turned a page, then turned it back, then read the same column again. Nobody asked whether the pattern was coincidental. The board's questions were precise and unhurried. How many clients had received affected parts? Whether any components had been installed in active aircraft, and if so, whether recalls had been initiated. Whether the alterations followed a consistent method or appeared improvised. Whether Benton's retired lead inspector, whose original signatures appeared on the unaltered certificates, had been aware of the post-scan modifications. Paige answered each one. 17 clients. 3 active aircraft had received affected valve housings. Recall notices were being drafted. The alteration method was consistent. The same fields were modified in the same direction across every batch, which indicated a deliberate and repeating process, not a scanning error. The inspector had retired 11 months ago. He had not been notified. The CFO asked whether Mitchell had acted alone. Paige said the audit was still determining scope, but the digital modifications had been made from a login assigned to Mitchell's workstation, and no other user account had accessed the quality archive during the relevant windows. The vote to terminate Mitchell Graves was 6-1. The dissenting director requested an outside investigation before termination. He was overruled. The audit findings were referred to the Federal Aviation Administration and the Department of Justice for review under aerospace quality compliance statutes. Paige proposed the creation of a floor-level oversight committee at Benton, elected by workers, not appointed by management, with direct reporting access to the Caldwell Corporate Compliance Office. The board approved unanimously. Then she announced that Gavin Thatcher's handwritten verification system, the personal clipboard log that had tracked every part through Station 9 for 14 months, would be adopted company-wide as a secondary quality protocol, running parallel to the digital system at every Caldwell facility. She called it the Thatcher Protocol. Gavin was not in the room. He was at Station 9, measuring a hydraulic valve housing, writing the numbers in blue ink on a lined page. Now, what Paige had not expected was that removing Mitchell would be the easy part. The harder thing, the thing she was not prepared for, was facing the man who had defended her before he knew what the truth was and asking him to believe her now that he did. 2 days after the board meeting, Paige drove to Benton Manufacturing and walked onto the factory floor. The atmosphere had changed. The mezzanine office was dark. A temporary operations manager from Tigard had been installed in a desk on the factory floor itself. No glass walls, no elevation, no separation from the workers. The floor ran with a quietness that had nothing to do with decibels and everything to do with the absence of a particular kind of pressure. People spoke at normal pitch. The break room door stayed open. She found Gavin at Station 9. Clipboard open on the counter. Board gauge in his right hand. He looked up when she approached, but did not set his tools down. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did. For the log. All of it." Gavin set the gauge down slowly. He was polite. He was also somewhere she could not reach. Not cold, but separated by something she could feel and could not name. "I didn't do it for you," he said. His voice was not unkind. It was factual, the way he stated all things. Those parts go into aircraft. People sit in those seats. She nodded. She did not try to explain why she had gone undercover, or why she had not told him the truth, or why she had let him take a 3-day suspension for a login she could have overridden with a single phone call. The explanations existed. None of them would have closed the distance between where she stood and wherever he was. They were quiet for a moment, 3 feet apart, the machines around them running. At 4:15, the side door opened, and Bev walked in with Harper. Gavin's shift had run 40 minutes past the school pickup, and Bev, listed as an emergency contact since the night shift reassignment, had driven to Bridlemere and brought Harper to the plant. Harper walked across the floor the way children walk in spaces that belong to adults, carefully, looking at everything. She was carrying a model airplane in both hands, a balsa and tissue Cessna 172 with dihedral wings and a rubber band motor. She had glued the final strut herself the previous Saturday. "It's done," she said, and held it up. Paige crouched down. She did not reach for the airplane. She looked at it the way you look at something someone built with their own hands. "The wing angle," Paige said. "Did you set the dihedral yourself?" Harper nodded. "That's the part that makes it stable," Paige said. Harper glanced up at her father. Gavin was standing with his hands at his sides, watching the two of them. His expression did not move. He did not look away. 3 weeks later, the factory floor at Benton Manufacturing looked the same on the surface. Same machines, same stations, same break room with the vending machine and the stuck coin return. But the mezzanine office had a glass door that stayed propped open with a rubber wedge, and the oversight committee held its first meeting in the break room on a Tuesday. 6 floor workers, elected by their peers, with a direct line to the Caldwell compliance office. Bev Sanderson was the first chair. She accepted the way she accepted most things, with a small nod. The Thatcher Protocol was installed across all 4 Caldwell facilities within 2 weeks. Printed pads of the log sheets, modeled on Gavin's handwritten format, arrived in shrink-wrapped boxes. Each station received a steel clipboard and a supply of blue pens. The pads had a small line of text printed at the bottom of every page that read Secondary Verification, Thatcher Protocol. Gavin had not asked for the credit. It had not occurred to him that anyone would give it. On a Wednesday afternoon, Paige called Gavin into the temporary operations office and offered him the newly created position of Quality Assurance Lead, salaried, full benefits, direct reporting authority to the Corporate Quality Director in Tigard. Gavin listened to the full description without interrupting. When she finished, he shook his head. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I'm better on the floor." "You're overqualified for the floor. You know that. That's not the same thing." She was quiet for a moment. Then she opened the desk drawer and took out the white plastic temp badge that had been clipped to her shirt for 2 weeks. She set it on the desk between them. The name on it read Paige in black marker. No last name, no title, no clearance level. "I kept this," she said. "I don't entirely know why." Gavin looked at the badge for a long time. "That was the only version of you I knew how to talk to," he said. "Would you like to try the other one?" He picked up the badge, turned it over once in his hand, and set it back down on the desk. He did not say yes, but he did not leave, either. He stood in the small office with the glass door propped open and the sound of the factory floor coming through it, and the silence between them was not empty. Friday evening, Gavin and Harper sat at the kitchen table with the balsa Cessna between them. Harper was painting a registration number on the tail in careful black letters. N7241 Papa. Gavin held the fuselage steady with one hand while she worked. The kitchen smelled like the frozen pizza they had split an hour ago, and the window above the sink was cracked open to let the cool air in. The doorbell rang. Gavin looked at the clock on the microwave. 6:45. He was not expecting anyone. Harper set down her brush. She looked at her father. He stood, walked to the front door, and opened it. Paige was standing on the step. She held a paper bag from the Thai place on Capitol Highway in one hand. The other hand was in her jacket pocket. She did not say anything about the company, the protocol, the board, the audit, or the 2 weeks she had spent on his factory floor pretending to be someone she was not. She lifted the bag slightly. "I brought enough for 3, she said. Gavin stood in the doorway. Behind him, Harper leaned sideways in her chair to see past him. The Cessna sat on the table between the paint jar and a folded paper towel, one wing still wet. He stepped back and opened the door wider. Neither of them had needed a title to know what the other one was.